What's up everyone, my name is Jedith, and after weeks of silence, we finally got some changes to Demon Hunter on the alpha. This time, the changes are for the Aldrachi Reaver tree. We've been getting updates for Felskard for the past few weeks, but this time, it's for the other one. So I've been on the alpha, kind of testing it, and really digging deep into how all of these things are working. We're discovering things that are kind of still broken or maybe not working exactly how they were intended. There's a lot of things that have been fixed, and there's some interesting kind of interactions here that I definitely want to tell you guys about, so keep watching. So let's start by reading the blue post that Blizzard put out to kind of tell us what their intention was. It says, today's alpha build update includes changes for Aldrachi Reaver Demon Hunters. We've heard your feedback regarding short duration buff windows and the rotational pressure they impose, and we're taking steps to address that. By reducing the frequency with which Art of the Glaive triggers, we open up some room to let your buffs persist for longer periods of time. We intend for this to smooth out the precision required and generally introduce more flexibility on timing. We've adjusted the value of several related effects to compensate for the slower cadence, and will be continuing to iterate on pacing. Please keep the feedback coming. So this is great. This means that they actually read the very long feedback post that I left for them in the feedback thread on the forums, among everyone else who also provided feedback. This is good. This means they're listening. Now, just quickly before we break down what each change was, I just want to point out there's some bugs that are still in this and things aren't working exactly how they should be. So Incisive Blade is not working. So Incisive Blade, when enhanced, Chaos Strike deals 30% increased damage. It's just simply not working. There is no damage bonus. It was previously working for Vengeance prior to this build, but now it's not working for either Havoc or Vengeance. And then the other one is Warblade's Hunger. Consuming a soul fragment causes your next Chaos Strike to deal 36,994 bonus damage. This isn't working either. There is no buff. There's no extra damage. There's nothing. So yeah, those two talents are still not working. So Wounded Quarry. So now it's always proccing damage if Reaver's Mark is on the target, and that's a pretty good change since the duration of Mark has been increased. In a lot of situations, the uptime on this is going to be pretty high. This is a really good change. This is really opening up the possibilities of having a bit more freedom in the rotation and less micromanagement of short little windows. So in situations where we are generating a lot of soul fragments and we're able to keep Reaver's Glaive, cycling through, we are going to keep pretty high uptime on this. But one thing to mention is that the soul fragment generation part of this talent in particular is still a chance. So it's not guaranteed, but the damage portion of it is. And yeah, like I said, Reaver's Mark being increased to 20 seconds is a very, very nice change. It used to be 5 seconds, and that was problematic because we'd be trying to line it up with all of the other really small cooldowns we had. Or not cooldowns, but like little windows. So we had Initiative, we had Inertia, and we had Essence Break. So the problem was we'd have to try to line up all of those little things. It's already hard enough with all of those on retail, and then we'd be adding another little 5-second window on top of that. That's kind of no longer an issue because that window on Reaver's Mark now is 20 seconds. And with it being 20 seconds, it's going to be a lot less to try to micromanage. And in certain situations, mainly dungeon scenarios where, mobs are continually dying and dropping soul fragments, we should be able to maintain very, very high uptime on this. It's definitely lower in single target, but there may be some other talent options in the class or spec tree that we can take that would help with that, and we're going to talk about that later on. So this next line basically means that they increased the amount of souls it takes to trigger Art of the Glaive. So going from 3 souls to 6 might sound like it's a nerf to the talent, but it's not inherently bad because before it was 3, and it was making it happen way too frequently, so it kind of hijacked your rotation. You essentially just always had Reaver's Glaive to press, but now you'll get it kind of a bit more sporadically, and it'll hopefully feel like something actually important and impactful when you do get to use it. The damage on it and some of the consequential effects from it have been increased to match it. And now Intent Pursuit, the cooldown reduction to the hunt has been increased to 4 seconds. Now this does seem like a nice change at first glance, but you do have to remember that enhanced abilities are tied to the use of Reaver's Glaive, right? So the frequency that we'll be getting Reaver's Glaive has been reduced. So this may or may not be a net neutral change. I'm not 100% sure, but I do know that we are getting to use Reaver's Glaive less often, and they increased the cooldown reduction that we're getting when we do use those enhanced abilities, so it might even out. Okay, and now Evasive Action no longer extends or refreshes Tactical Retreat, and it does not extend the Initiative window. So yeah, that does probably sound bad when you read it, and you're probably looking at it from, an outlook of okay, now I'm doing less damage because I'm not able to get those buffs extended, right? But truthfully, having power attached to a node that is supposed to be strictly quality of life or utility would have been problematic and pretty unhealthy. There's like not many reasons you'd ever really want to double Vengeful Retreat outside of very, very specific situations, but if you had those benefits attached to it, be forced to always use that node and have even more movement for damage affixes sort of added into the mix of our rotation, which isn't good. And then, like I said, they increased the damage of Reaver's Glaive by 200%. Now, this means that the damage on Reaver's Glaive was actually tripled. If it was increased by 100%, that would have meant you would have the initial value plus a duplicate of that initial value, so that would have been doubled. But to increase something by 200% means that it was tripled overall. So this is something you kind of pick up on as you learn tooltip speak. It's a lot like lawyer speak. You know, you get to understand it. Understanding it is a skill you kind of learn over time. But yeah, it got tripled. And having the damage tripled is great to see since we're using it less frequently, and it felt really underwhelming to press before. And one thing that I do want to mention is that Reaver's Glaive does actually work and benefits from Accelerated Blade. So on top of the newly tripled damage, it's also getting 60% to the first target that it hits. And despite working with Accelerated Blade, Reaver's Glaive still does not work with Serrated Glaive or Furious Throws or Soulscar. And with beta just around the corner, I think we're at a point now where there aren't going to be many bugs left in these trees other than the ones I pointed out kind of at the start of this video. So we can assume that these interactions are probably intended to not be happening, but who knows? Now the other really cool thing is that Escalation is now working properly. So using Chaos Strike as the second enhanced ability in the pattern makes Reaver's Mark go from a 15% damage increase for 20 seconds to a 30% damage increase for 20 seconds, which is insanely powerful. And then just some other undocumented changes is that Thrill of the Fight is now increasing attack speed by 15% for 20 seconds. It was initially only 5 seconds. This was probably adjusted to line up with Reaver's Mark. So when you use Chaos Strike as your second enhanced ability in the pattern, they're both on the same 20-second buff window. Hey, by the way, guys, if you're enjoying this content, make sure you subscribe to this YouTube channel. I'm trying to get to 30k subs before the War Within launches, and we're like a couple hundred subs away from reaching that goal. So if you haven't subbed already, do me a solid and drop a sub. Okay, so now I want to talk about gameplay just a little bit. There's a few things that have still been kind of on my mind about how this whole spec kind of works. So it seems like to me that button bloat is still a thing. Playing like a Throw Glaive build here kind of clogs up the rotation. Here's my dilemma, right? You wouldn't want to be sitting on 2 Throw Glaive charges because we're taking all these Throw Glaive talents. We have Soul Scar, we have, you know, things like Furious Throws. We want to be using our Throw Glaive charges. But then it becomes a problem of what abilities do we prioritize? Because we want to be spending our, enhanced abilities from Reaver's Glaive, so our Chaos Strikes and our Blade Dances, but we also want to be pressing Chaos Strike as much as possible to get Soul Fragments through Demonic Appetite, because getting up to 6 Soul Fragments is what we need to be able to get Reaver's Glaive. So back in Season 1 of Dragonflight, we played a Throw Glaive build, and we could comfortably substitute Chaos Strike for Throw Glaive because it just did more damage and there was less attached to Chaos Strike. So in AoE, our Essence Break combo was really only to buff Death Sweep, and then instead of using 2 Annihilations, we'd be manually using Throw Glaive. And now we also have a talent called Fire Inside, which gives us 2 charges baseline of Immolation Aura, and then we also have a chance to get resets. So spending those GCDs on Immo wasn't something we had to really worry about back in Season 1. And then now in Season 4, we have our 2-piece tier bonus, which uses Throw Glaive for us whenever we press Blade Dance. So we have that button essentially removed from our rotation. And while I don't fully agree with that sort of interaction, and I think it's kind of silly to have one button completely remove another button, which is affected by 4 to 5 talents from our rotation, it makes that gameplay that we have right now actually work, and it's kind of needed. So you can see where the dilemma is, right? You go into your rotation, and you want to be using your Throw Glaive charges, but you also want to be pressing Chaos Strike as much as possible to get the Soul Fragments. If you're spending your GCDs on Throw Glaive, you're not pressing Chaos Strike enough, and you're probably not going to get your Soul Fragment charges, your stacks, to be able to press Reaver's Glaive. And it is important to get those stacks as quickly as you can, because picking up a Soul Fragment gives you the buff, and that buff now has a duration which can fall off. So if you go 30 seconds without picking up a Soul Fragment, you're going to lose your entire stack of the Soul Fragments. So truthfully, the best solution I can come up with for this problem is to just add Throw Glaive into Demonic Appetite. So that ability also has the chance to spawn soul fragments on top of Chaos Strike. That way there's really no hesitation or question in the player's mind about what talents they should be taking. Because it kind of seems like a no-brainer that you would want to take Throw Glaive talents based off of this hero talent tree, right? It's a Glaive hero talent tree. You would probably want to take the Throw Glaive talents. But it's seeming, the way that everything's set up now, is that you probably wouldn't do that. So I think adding Throw Glaive to Demonic Appetite could potentially solve that problem. So on that note, if we're not taking the Throw Glaive talents, what talents are we going to take? So I kind of came up with a secondary build, an alternative build, and I don't think these are going to be the set in stone talents that we would take as a substitute, but I was just trying to find something, some other way that we could play without having to lean too heavily into Throw Glaive. So first off, you'll notice that we're taking Elysian Decree. Oh, and by the way, Elysian Decree is now called Sigil of Spite. Kind of a cool name, huh? So I think this is something we're going to have to take no matter what. As long as we're playing this hero talent tree, we're going to have to take Sigil of Spite. So Sigil of Spite gives you up to 3 Lesser Soul Fragments, and if you take Soul Sigil, that increases that up to 4. So we can get 4 from Sigil of Spite, and we can get an extra one from Sigil of Flame. So that's 5 in our opener now. We now need to get 1 more if we want to guarantee it in our opener. That's not really possible. There's no other way to guarantee a soul fragment. So you'll notice that even if we go into it and we use everything that we have, we're gonna be short 1 soul fragment in our opener, and we're not gonna have Reaver's Glaive for it. So again, this is problematic because it's supposed to be a big damage window that we want to stack on top of things like Essence Break and, Initiative and whatnot, but we're not able to get that many soul fragments that quick to be able to have it for our opener. So this is another problem that we have to try to solve. The solution that I can think of that is pretty clear if you've been following some of the other classes and the other hero talent trees that have been, getting iterations over the past few weeks, is something similar to what Feral Druids get with Druid of the Claw. So there's a talent in that tree called Killing Strikes. So the way they could utilize this for Demon Hunter is they could have it work with the Hunt. So the first time you use the Hunt after entering combat could give you a free Reaver's Glaive, and then you could utilize that Reaver's Glaive for your opener. Anyways, back to the talent swapping. So now that we're dropping Throw Glaive from our rotation, and we're really only pressing it when we need to press Reaver's Glaive, we can drop things like Accelerated Blade, Furious Throws, and we can get rid of Soul Scar. So here you can see I'm taking Relentless Onslaught instead of Soul Scar because the 10% chance to trigger a second Chaos Strike, that second Chaos Strike can also potentially spawn a Lesser Soul Fragment. Now, I'm still taking Serrated Glaive here because it does work with Chaos Strike as well. It just straight up increases Chaos Strike's damage by 15%. And this is a clear choice over something like Improved Chaos Strike, which only increases damage by 10%. So which one are you going to take? 15% or 10%? We're going to take 15%. And then we're also just putting a point into Critical Chaos for some more Fury. Now again, I don't think these talents are like the absolutely best optimized choices, but I'm just kind of trying to put things in place and having something set up to substitute for pressing Throw Glaive and taking the Throw Glaive talents. All of the optimization and that sort of stuff will happen when we can eventually do sims, and that's going to happen way later into the beta cycle. So now with this setup, we have a lot more freedom in our rotation. We can focus on our Essence Break combo, we can press our Immolation Aura procs when needed, we can weave in Sigil of Spite and Sigil of Flame when we need it, and then we're also just using Blade Dance on cooldown and spamming Chaos Strikes for Soul Fragments. So I think all of these changes to Aldrachi Reaver this time around are great changes, and they honestly make it a lot better to play. It's pretty clearly defined now that you probably want to end your pattern with Chaos Strike in single target to get Reaver's Mark, and then you're going to end with Blade Dance in AoE. It's pretty cut and dry, straight and simple. Except there's something that I discovered, and I'm unsure if this is intended, but one of the new things that I kind of stumbled upon after this alpha build is that after you pick up 6 soul fragments, you get Reaver's Glaive, but you don't have to use it. You can hold onto it and continue picking up soul fragments. So you can hang onto it long enough that you go up to even 20 stacks of the buff. This then allows you to use Reaver's Glaive, execute your pattern, if that's what are we going to continue calling it that, the pattern. Your second enhanced ability will always generate a soul fragment, so picking up that soul fragment then kind of like pokes your buff and pushes 6 more stacks away from you, and you get Reaver's Glaive again. So you can bank them and then chain them. So what if you end your first pattern with Chaos Strike to get the 30% damage buff for 20 seconds, then end your next pattern with Blade Dance, getting those extra 3 slashes per target, and have them all be buffed by 30%. Again, I'm unsure if this is intended, but hey, it could be cool. But it could also be really annoying, because that's quite the setup. I think a lot of these changes that were made to this talent tree today are excellent, and they make it a lot easier to play. Again, it's still going to be kind of not a straightforward tree, not a straightforward gameplay loop like Felsguard would be, but I definitely think a lot of the pain points of how this was functioning previously have been solved. Let me know what you guys think in the comments, and make sure to subscribe to the channel. I'll catch you next time. Peace.